Hi everyone, in this series we're going to be taking a look at some of the fundamental basics in Maya 2013. I'm going to be expanding on some of the basic information that is generally available, as a lot of the options that you might need to be aware of quite often are left out of that basic reference material. In this particular video we're going to be taking a look at some of the extra options for the move, rotate and scale tools within Maya. And you can get the basic information for those tools within the Essential Skills Movies panel using this number 2 video just here. So assuming that you've had a look at that and you've kind of got a good grasp on the information in that video, let's take a look now at some of the extra options. So I have my, I've got a couple of objects just here, okay. And we're going to be taking a look at this little object just here. So I've got my move tool turned on over here on the left hand side over in the toolbox, and you can see we get this manipulator handle, and obviously in the Essential Skills Movies file, basically the operation for the move tool is you can click and drag on the manipulator arrows just here like this to move your object in the direction that the arrow is pointing. You can also select the little square in the middle of the manipulator to freely drag in multiple directions at once. Now keep in mind that this central square handle basically is pointing towards the camera that we're looking through for this particular viewport, this perspective. So it's always going to allow you to move the object in relation to this perspective viewport. It won't necessarily let you move this object away from or closer to this camera. Okay, so we can sort of move up, we can move down, and we can move left and right, but we can't move the object towards us or away from us using this little square in the middle. In order to get the object closer to us, we would need to drag forwards and then maybe up and then maybe sideways, and you can see now the object is closer to the position that we're looking at the viewport from. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the more complex settings or optional settings for this tool. What we're going to do is we're going to pop over to our right hand side and we're going to open up the tool settings tab just here. And you can see we get this huge panel filled with little tick boxes and buttons and numbers and lots of different settings. Okay, for the most part, most of these settings are pretty basic, but due to the language that's used for labeling some of these, you might not necessarily understand what these options mean. So we're going to take a look at just a few of them. We'll take a look at the main ones. Okay, so the first thing that we generally find, of course, as usual with the tool settings panel, we've got a reset tool button just up here, which you can use to reset all of these settings back to their defaults. And the first sort of set of options we've got is the move axis. Obviously we've got things like object world, live object rotation axis and so on, and normal. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'm going to go through just a couple of the main ones. Okay, so the first is world. Basically what this is a system called a universal or a world coordinate system, and it's common through all 3D software packages, and it's also common to engineering and architectural software like AutoCAD. And that's more or less where this system was developed originally, in engineering and architectural software. Most 3D software actually has its roots or its ancestry in architectural or engineering software to begin with. So this is one of these systems that's very old, and it's sort of common to all of the related types of software. So let's take a look at what world is. So basically, when you've got your move tool set to world, the handles for the move tool will be aligned to the grid for your 3D world. Okay, so this big 3D universe that we've got, this infinite space that we've got, in order to work out which direction is which, we've got this coordinate system. So when the move axis is set to world, basically the move handles will allow me to move the object via the different directions within the world. So it's aligning to the grid. Okay. So what happens if I don't want to move an object in, let's say, the forward direction in the world, which is this direction? Okay, this is the z-axis here, which is basically covered with this blue arrow. Let's say this is a car, and I want this car to drive forward like this. Okay, but let's say that the road that it's driving on actually isn't in this direction, it's actually cutting across the grid in this direction. Okay, in order to get the object to rotate in that direction, or move in that direction, let's rotate it around, and let's say this is the direction it's going to be driving. Okay, you can see here that the move tool is still lined up with the grid. Okay, so if I try and move the object forward, it's actually kind of skidding sideways now, which is not what I want. I want the object to move forward based on the direction the object is facing, not based on the forward direction of the world or the grid. So in order to move it forward the way I want it to, I need to come into the tool, the move tool settings, and I need to change the move axis to object, like this. So you can see when that activates, the move tool manipulator just here rotates around and aligns itself to the rotation of the object. So now I can move the object in its true forward direction, which is what you would expect to happen in that situation. So what happens if we've got an angled object like this, and let's say I want to take this polygon just here, and I want to move this polygon in the direction the polygon is facing. Okay, so in this case, this polygon that I've got on the top just here, I'll just right click and select face, and I'll select that polygon. So let's say I want to take this polygon here, and I want to move it directly out in the direction the polygon is facing, which is sort of up diagonally to the right. I don't want to move it straight up, and I don't want to move it sideways like this. Let's take a quick look at what we don't want. Okay, so my move axis here, if I set it back to original, which is world, I don't want to move the polygon up, and I don't want to move it sideways. I want to actually move it in the direction that this polygon is facing, which is directly out in this direction. What I can do is select normal's average, and that will realign the handle to the averaged out direction of the corners of this polygon. So you can see now this handle is actually pointing out in the direction that the polygon's facing, and I can move it out like that. Okay, so those are probably the three main options you'll use: object, world, and normal's average. And generally speaking, normal's average is used when you've got a component selection, such as a polygon, or perhaps some vertices like this. So you can see here in this case, these vertices, the average or normal average direction is this one here. And if I select a third vertex, the normal's average direction changes. And you can see it's sort of an odd shape, like that. Okay, so let's say now we've got an issue where let's just move this object across here. I'm just going to change its rotation again, back to default, back to zeros. Okay, so let's say I want to take this object. Let's say this is a hill, and this is a cable car going up the hill. All right, and I wanted to position this and move it so that it actually slides up the hill like this. Okay, now what we could do is just animate it so it sort of starts in this position, and then we could manually move it up and across to there, and then keyframe it there so that it's going to move between those two positions. The problem with that is that I'm not actually keeping the object at the same height above the surface of the hill. So when it's moving, it might look like it's digging more into the hill or it's floating above the hill. What I want to do is actually move it in the exact same angle based on this edge. So what I can do is align the handle for this object to an edge on this object. To make it a little bit easier to see the edges, although we can see the differing shades for the different sides of this object at the moment, I'm just going to turn on wireframe on shaded, and that'll bring up these blue lines. So let's say I want to align the move manipulator tool to those edges. What I can do is, I'll just press reset for a second. What I can do here is go set to edge. I click this button and it tells me select edge to orient move manipulator axis with. And what I should be able to do is click on the edge that I want to align to, like that. And you can see now this x-axis handle, this red one, is now lined up exactly the same direction as these edges. So when I move the object, it will basically look like it's sliding up and down the hill without floating above or digging into the side, like that. Now you can also set your angle to points or vertices within the object, and also to faces. I tend to avoid those two options primarily because they tend to come out with completely random values. So if I go select face and I click, in this case that sort of worked all right, but sometimes you might find that these two handles here end up on sort of 45-degree angles, in which case you would be able to move the object in this direction still, but if you wanted to move it up and down the hill, you wouldn't really be able to do that. So you can kind of get odd results. So if I go set to point, for example, you can see there sometimes you end up with something like that, where it's not really going to allow you to move this object in a useful direction, because it's going to end up kind of crooked. When you use these tools or these particular options, don't forget to reset the tool afterwards, so that you don't accidentally end up moving objects off on weird angles. Okay, let's take a look at discrete move for a second. Let's turn this on. We've got a step size, okay, and what this is doing is it's basically making the object snap. And in this case, it's almost like it snaps to the grid. It's not quite snapping to the grid, okay, but you can see there basically it's jumping one grid space at a time. The bigger the step size, the bigger the snapping or the jump in between the snapping. Okay, so you can see there now it's jumping bigger gaps. With the move tool, not necessarily used a lot. Okay, it does have its usefulness, but I tend to find that the discrete value works best with the rotate tool. So to give you an idea very quickly, the rotate tool has a lot of the same settings, which is sort of why I'm not really kind of covering all of them. You can see the scale tool has a lot of the same options, including discrete scale. With discrete rotate, which we can find just here, if I turn that on, so normally you rotate, it just freely rotates. With discrete rotate on, the default is 15, it will actually snap to 15-degree increments, which makes it very easy to rotate around to 45 degrees, or even to rotate 90 degrees. Okay. So the discrete option basically gives you snapping for your tools. Okay, I'm going to scroll down a little bit now, and let's take a look at retain component spacing. Now for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to manually and randomly move a couple of these vertices around. Okay, so I've got these two vertices selected. Okay, now usually by default retain component spacing is switched on. So when I move these two vertices around, you can see that they actually maintain their distance from one another. Okay, like that. When I change retain component spacing and turn it off, you can see that it's still maintaining that distance. However, if I was using my snap values at the top of the screen here, so for example, if I was going to say snap to grid, what this is going to do is align the selection to the grid. With this switched on, when I move, you can see that the two vertices, I'll just do that again from this direction, you can see that the two vertices actually jump and align themselves vertically because that's the direction that I dragged. If I do it from this direction, so you can see if I look down on the object now, if I drag in the X direction, you can see that they both align themselves in this direction as well. So retain component spacing can be switched on or off. It can be used to align, in this case, vertices in a single object, so that they're all lined up again if you've accidentally shifted them and they're a little bit all over the place. Okay, so it can be used to align, but it can also be switched on in order to keep objects spaced the way that they currently are, in order to keep the shape of your object like this. Okay. If we come a bit further down, soft select, if I turn that on and I select a vertex, you can see I get these yellow edges. If I increase the fall off radius like this, you can see that they start turning red, or orange, then red, then brown, and we don't have any black ones left. Basically what this is going to do is it's going to move this vertex fully as much as I drag the handle, and then the darker the color gets, any vertices which have color on them will also move, but the darker they are, the less they will move. So basically what I can do is kind of squash the object down. So it's moving more than the selected vertex, but by differing amounts depending on how close they are to the original selected vertex. This is called soft select, and it can be used to organically shape your objects. Almost, it's sort of a little bit like sculpting them out of plasticine or clay. Okay, you've got different fall off modes. So volume basically is a basic distance from the selected object or objects. Okay, so that's basically measured from this point. Surface, surface basically runs along the surface of the object by this distance. If I reduce that distance down, so you can see here I've got some black points. These won't move. See, they stay anchored. And the brighter the vertices get, in this case, the brighter that selection gets up to yellow, the more the object or that section will move. Generally speaking, I don't use volume as much. I tend to use surface because it's a little bit more controllable. You can see I can separate these out more than I could before. Once again, don't forget to turn this off. If you ever see your selections with this orange or yellow, it generally means you've got soft select turned on. Also, you can reset the tool just there. It's got its own independent reset. Now we have one last option here, which is generally quite important. I'm just going to make a new object just here, and I'm going to center it in the grid. The last option is reflection, which you'll find just here, reflection settings. Once again, you'll find these in rotate, you can see here, and you'll also find them in scale, which is why I'm not necessarily covering them with each of these tools. So what these do is when we've got some form of component selection, like let's say this polygon just here, or this face. Okay, now you can see here I've got it's the side of the object, okay, as noted by the direction of the x-axis. Okay, if I turn on reflection, you can see these little yellow dots appear on the corners of the selection, and we get corresponding dots here. So if I move this object out, you can see that the opposite occurs on the other side of the object, like this. Okay, now in this case, if I just grab these and move them up, you can see that it just moves the whole object up, and you might say, well, that is literally just moving the whole object up. It's not really mirroring the movement per se. It actually is, and to kind of demonstrate that a little bit more clearly, if I add a division to the width down the middle of the object like this, so we've now got a line running around the middle, and I reselect that face and I move this up, you can see what's actually happening there. It is moving these 4 vertices up in the same way that it's doing these 4 vertices. It's just that without any division in the middle, really that's resulting in everything moving up with it. Okay, but you can see now that we're actually getting this this sort of static section in the middle, like that. So the same goes with the scale tool. So if I grab the scale tool, I can scale this up, I can scale it forward. You can see that it's actually affecting both sides at the same time. And the same happens with the rotate tool. If I select that, you can see I can spin the shape around. You know, I can twist it forwards or backwards. So that comes in, that reflection setting comes in really handy when you're modeling something and you want to try and keep both sides of the object the same. Once again, don't forget to turn the reflection tool off when you're not using it. This is one of the tools that if you leave it switched on when you're not using it, it can actually cause errors to occur in your modeling when you're working. So those are the few of the extra options which you can find under the Select tool, the Move tool, the Rotate tool, and the Scale tool. There are some slight differences between them, but those are the basic ones that you should know about, because they really will help you to be a lot more flexible with your modeling, and you'll be able to make more complex shapes.